I need professional help. Hi, I'm D from D&D Ditches, and today the D stands for Don't Tell My Mama What I've been spending my money on. I'll tell you what, I'll cut you a deal. I'll promise to show you what I've got if you promise not to tell. Shh. Let's get started. You'll see that I'm still using my Githyanki playmat. I ordered the Lady of Pain one as well, as I mentioned last month, but it never arrived. And that tends to be the thing when you're purchasing things internationally, is that sometimes they don't all arrive. This first box is huge. Look at that. I can't even fit it all on camera at once. And if you missed last month's unboxing, I'm going to put a link up here for you, so check it out. So even though it looks like I have a lot this month, most of this is from within Australia, so I don't have to pay international shipping, which meant that I was able to buy more for the same amount of cost. So there were 4 items in the first box. I have Ravenloft, the Monstrous Compendium number 3, Ravenloft, A Light in the Belfry, Planescape Hellbound, the Blood War, and Planescape Planes of Chaos. So looking at these box sets side by side is interesting to see, and I've never noticed that before, is that Hellbound and Planes of Chaos are actually different sizes. You see that? Even though I've already done a showcase video on all the Planescape box sets, which I'll put the link up here if you wanted to have a watch, I never noticed that the boxes were different sizes until now, putting them side by side together like this. So let's have a look at the Monstrous Compendium first of all. This is Appendix number 3, Creatures of Darkness. So when 2nd edition launched, what they had for the Monstrous Compendium, they were actually released as a binder, like one of those 3-ring binder things. Ring binders were very popular back in the 90s. I remember going to high school back in the day, and we would do a lot of our schoolwork using the ring binders. But then at some point, I guess they must have realized these loose sheets were damaged quite a lot. So these days, when you see the original ring binder Monstrous Compendiums, they don't tend to be in a very good shape. So Appendix 1 and 2 were originally released under the ring binder format, but then it was re-released in a book format like this. So Appendix 3 went straight to the book release. Giving it a bit of a flip through. So these obviously use the 2nd edition stat blocks. And the thing with the Ravenloft line was that most of its interior artwork are done in black and white, and generally only the covers are done in color. Good old Strahd zombie. And while we're on Ravenloft, let's have a look at this box set, the A Light in the Belfry. And you see the sign here on the corner says, includes TSR interactive audio CD. So I briefly talked about the audio CD in my Planescape box set showcase, as a player's primer for the Outlands for Planescape also contained an audio CD. And this was something that they were trying to experiment with back in the mid-90s. But then I also heard that the CDs were extremely expensive to produce because they had to hire the actors to do the voice acting and then the manufacturing of these discs. And the result of that is a much slimmer adventure. Look at the size of this box. And this is a 32-page book, just like the Planescape box set. And it also comes with a map. Also a smaller map than what the box sets typically give us. They're usually about twice as big. And then we also have a track listing for the CD. So I believe how this adventure worked was that when you went into a particular room, there would be a track number. For example, the gate would be track 14 here. And then you would play track 14 from the CD, and then I imagine the track would narrate what's going on. I've obviously not heard the tracks on the CD, so I can't tell you that myself. And also the cover of the adventure is detachable. Let's go with Planes of Chaos next. If you watched my Planescape box set showcase video, you'll know that I already own 2 of these, and this will be my 3rd set. And the reason why I bought this is because the set that I showed in that video, I discovered I was missing 2 posters, whereas this is supposed to be complete. So there should be 5 posters, yes. The Planes of Chaos box set covers the 5 chaotically aligned outer planes, so there are Arborea, Ysgard, Limbo, Pandemonium, and the Abyss. And this is a poster for Arborea, which was one of the ones that I was missing from my other box set. See, Arborea. This is also known as Olympus, a Greek-themed plane. But the Greeks also share the plane with the elves, as you can see. We've got Arvindor, which is pointed that way. It's not even on the poster itself. Let's see if I can find the Ysgard poster, which I think this might be it. Nope, that's Limbo. Pandemonium. This is the Abyss. I can see the cranium rats. So this is Ysgard. So Ysgard is also known as Asgard, which is the Norse-themed plane. And what Ysgard looks like is you can see these, they're supposed to be islands, they call them earthbergs, but they kind of look like turrets in this poster. So they're floating earthbergs and occasionally they would crash into each other. And the different realms exist on the surface of the earthbergs, as you can see. With the pictures, we've got Asgard, Gates of the Moon. This is the realm of Selûne from Forgotten Realms. I have used that in my game. Elfheim, Jotunheim, Vanaheim. So the surface of the earthberg that's facing up is the first layer of Ysgard. And on the opposite side, you can see that these earthbergs are on fire. They're actually lava. And that is the second layer of Ysgard, Muspelheim. So I am glad that this box set is complete and in very good shape. We have a 16-page Monstrous supplement. This is the booklet which gives us sample adventures for each of the planes. We have 3 adventures for each plane, so that's 15 all up. The travel log is the only book that the players are allowed to read. This is written like an actual travel log. And it covers 2 or 3 sites from each plane. And the Book of Chaos is meant to be read by the DM and covers the planes in more detail. It's worth noting that this is the first Planescape campaign expansion box set, and you can kind of tell that the designers are still trying to find their footing as far as what they wanted to do with the planes, which is to say that subsequent products tend to do a better job than this book. And lastly, let's go through the Hellbound box set. The whole box is in very good condition except for a small nick here on the box, but overall, really great condition. And the reason why I wanted another one of this box is that the one I own is not in the greatest condition. If you see my previous video, the box had a lot of sun damage and it was slightly crushed, and some of the booklets had some water damage. So this box is called a deluxe adventure and accessory because we have the bargain, which is a comic book. We have the Planescape Conspectus, which is marketing material. And it gives you a list of all the Planescape products that's been released. So we have the Chant of the War, which is the player's guide. This is the book that I had water damage on my other set, whereas this is pretty much pristine and perfect. Although it looks like that there's some stains on the book, like that. So the premise of this box set is it aims to expand the Blood War and provides a lot of lore expansion on how the war started, the reason for the war, how all the different races on the planes feel about the war, strategies, magic, and provides several of the sites where the war takes place. And then in this book, War Games is the adventure. There are 3 adventures contained in this book. This is for 4 to 6 players between levels 5 to 8. And this booklet, Visions of War, contains artwork provided by Tony DiTerlizzi, which depicts various scenes taking place during this adventure that you can use to set the mood and set the scene while you're running this adventure. And this is what they called a deluxe adventure and accessory box set. I think this is one of the last ones that they produced because it's obviously very costly to produce, and the Planescape line as a whole is already not profitable as it is. Let's go through this one next. And we have Ravenloft, The Nightmare Lands. This is a campaign expansion and it's of medium size. So there should be 4 booklets and 2 maps inside this. I've got a little bit of damage to the box here. I'm gonna have to try to glue that back together. This was sent internationally, and sometimes items get damaged during the freight, so there isn't really much I can do about that. The bottom box is also damaged. And this is part of the reason why I prefer to source these books locally, as less distance means less likelihood for the goods to be damaged. This box set is about adventuring in one of the domains of dread of Ravenloft called the Nightmare Lands. So book 1, The Journal of Dr. Ilhausen. This book talks about how one enters the Nightmare Lands. There are 2 types of visitors travel to the mad domain as the Nightmare Lands. The first types are dreamers. Dreamers are those who fall asleep in the physical waking world with which they are all familiar. Their physical bodies remain in the waking world while their minds enter the Nightmare Lands. Second type is called wanderers. Wanderers are those who physically travel to the Nightmare Lands, crossing the misty borders the same manner as you or I would step from Nova Vasa to Hyaslan. So the second way is to actually go there physically while you're in Ravenloft, being as that's one of the domains of dread. But the first way seems more of like a Freddy Krueger scenario where all you have to do is fall asleep and your consciousness will travel to the Nightmare Lands while your body does not. So book 2 is The Rules and Dreams of Nightmare Lands. This book seems to give you new rules on what happens when you are in the Nightmare Lands, for example, your ability scores. It reminds me a little bit of when you're entering the astral plane, and the Nightmare Lands is more like the plane of dreams in that it carries additional rules and other conditions. There is one Planescape module called Something Wild, where the players will dream, and the adventure itself suggests incorporating the rules from this box set. And as I mentioned before, most of the art from Ravenloft is in black and white. And book 3 is Book of Nightmares. I believe this is the adventure book. So Adventure 1, Dreams Within Dreams. Adventure 2 is Dark Harvest, not to be confused with Grim Harvest, which is a separate Ravenloft adventure. Adventure 3, The Loathsome Deep, and Adventure 4, The Rose of Midnight. So this book contains 4 adventures and it's 64 pages. And we have another Monstrous supplement. As Ravenloft is a horror setting, most of these monsters are horror-esque monsters. And then we have the maps. These posters are single-sided. There's nothing on the back. We've got another fairly big box here. And in this box we have 3 Al-Qadim adventure box sets, Corsairs of the Great Sea, 1001 Adventures, and Secrets of the Lamp. So a brief summary of Al-Qadim. This was a setting released in 1992. It is the Arabian Nights setting. In recent years it's garnered some not great reputation because it faced allegations of cultural appropriation, because it was essentially written by white people that wanted to play Aladdin, more or less. You can go check out the Critical Read series by the Asians Represent podcast to learn more about it if you're interested. However, for me, I just see it as works of fiction. In no way does it represent the real life cultures. So pretty much every single Al-Qadim adventure was presented in a box set like this, except the final one, which was released in 1999 called Reunion. So we'll look at these one at a time. So first up is the Corsairs of the Great Sea. There are generally a lot of goodies contained in each of these box sets. So we have some advertising. We have the campaign guide, which is also a source book on the Corsairs. This is the adventure booklet, which is 64 pages. We have a poster map. And then we have 6 of these artwork pieces printed on cardstock. Most of them are used to represent maps. Zakhara is part of the world that Al-Qadim belongs to, and in D&D canon, Zakhara is part of Faerun. So we have Faerun over here, south of Chult and south of the Great Sea. And then we have Maztica over here across the sea from Faerun. Maztica is the Mesoamerica setting. And then towards the east, we have Karator, which is the Far East or the Asian setting. And all of these continents exist with Faerun on the planet Toril of Forgotten Realms. However, I believe the creator of the realms, Ed Greenwood, is not particularly fond of these other settings. So if you're running any of these games, you could just make them a separate world instead. And lastly, we also have some new monsters that you can use for this adventure. So Secrets of the Lamp. Similar kind of setup, we have the book which expands on the genie lore, which is 64 pages. Not a lot of artwork in these pages. Maybe I am just spoiled by Planescape. And then we have the adventure book. It looks like there are 3 adventures contained in this booklet. We've got Hazim the Fool, By the Numbers, and In the City of Brass. So it's intended for 3 to 5 characters starting from levels 2 to 5 to 4 to 7. And given that part of the adventure takes place in the City of Brass, maybe one can use this with a crossover adventure with Planescape. The City of Brass is located on the Plane of Fire, and very few Planescape adventures take place in the inner planes, so this might actually be a decent adventure to keep in mind of if I want to run an adventure in Plane of Fire. This is the map of the City of Brass. I recently covered the Planescape supplement called The Inner Planes as part of my supplement showcase video, which I'll put a link up here for you. And the map for the City of Brass presented in that book looks similar, so I can use this map instead if I want to run an adventure in the City of Brass myself. And then we have 6 pieces of artwork depicting various locales in the City of Brass. And then we have some additional monster stat blocks. Remember at the start of the video I talked about the initial Monstrous supplements being released in the ring binder format? Well, this is what I mean. So this is clearly designed so that you can add these monster stat blocks to your base Monstrous manual binder. And then the next one is called A Dozen and One Adventures. The Al-Qadim setting also takes inspiration from the stories from 1001 Nights, so clearly this is a reference. So compared to the last two Al-Qadim box sets, this one, they seem to have reversed the order of the two books. The book with the cover and color is the adventure book, whereas the book without the cover is the campaign book. So this explains that A Dozen and One Adventures is an anthology of 13 short adventures. And clearly this adventure takes place in Muluk, the City of Kings. So the adventure book is 64 pages, and that's divided into 13 adventures. And some of these adventures are only given 3 or 4 pages worth of write-ups. And then we have a poster map of Muluk, the City of Kings. And the artwork on the cards depict additional maps. More Monstrous Compendium entries. These are double-sided. You might also be able to spot the weakness with this format being that if you want to incorporate these loose sheets into your main Monstrous manual binder and you want to list everything alphabetically, it's kind of impossible to do so when you've got AL going straight to AZ. So it won't be possible to keep them in complete order. Okay, next up, let's dig into this box. Okay, so there should be a lot of 4 books in this pile. So first up we have Libris Mortis, the Book of Undead. This is a D&D 3.5 edition supplement. So during the 3.5 era, WotC released several monster ecology books. There were the Draconomicon, which I still consider the best 3.5 book. And there was also the Lords of Madness, which is the Book of Aberrations. It had mind flayers and beholders and that type of monsters inside. So Libris Mortis is the book on undead ecology. The condition of this book looks like it's brand new. I previously read through part of the book, but I heard that out of all the monster ecology books that this one is not as good as the other ones because it's mostly about crunch and there isn't as much lore about the creatures it's supposed to cover. There's a lot of different flavored undead monsters and character classes and spells. It introduces quite a few new undead monsters into 3.5. And the art is okay. 3.5 art is a bit hit and miss. Part of the reason that I think Draconomicon is the best is because the art was fantastic. Whereas in this one, it's alright. The next product we have is the Dark Sun Monstrous Compendium. This is the first one, called Terrors of the Desert. As per previously mentioned, this was released during the Ringbinder era of 2E. See that the holes have already been punched into the page, but this set seems like it's mostly unused. I also own Dark Sun Appendix 2. By that time, the Ringbinder era has gone and it was released as a proper book. These monster compendiums generally came with dividers, which contain various artwork depicting that setting. Very clearly Dark Sun, with the artwork done by Braun himself. And then you have these little tabs. The idea being you can use these cardboard pages to separate and index your compendium entries. You could sort them into alphabetical order, or you can sort them into per setting basis, or however you want. The idea is that you can just write on these tabs so you can use it for quick access. So the Dark Sun monster entries are always drawn in black and white outlines, while Braun's work provides a lot of the cover art. I just also want to point out that in Dark Sun, because the entire world is destroyed by a magical apocalypse and arcane magic further defiles the land, every creature in the world has evolved to a point where they have developed psionic powers. And if you look at all of these monster entries, they all have psionic powers listed. Psionics in 2E was an optional rule and required an additional supplement called the Complete Psionics Handbook. So the Complete Psionics Handbook is required to play Dark Sun, but this also gives the setting some additional flavor because every creature, whether it be humans, humanoids, monsters, plants, all have psychic powers because it is a harsh land and a harsh world with very few natural resources. Darwinism and survival of the fittest has essentially made all of the creatures evolve to the point where they develop psionic powers in order to survive in this harsh world. I also want to show this particular monster, the June Trapper, one of my favorite monsters in Dark Sun. Now you got to remember that the world of Dark Sun, called Athas, is filled with desert for as far as the eye can see. So oases are very rare. This monster appears to be an oasis, but this is a creature that uses the oasis as a trap. When a victim comes to drink at or near the pool, the trapper pulls itself down the pit it rests in and thus trapping the victim. A horrible, insanely cruel monster, because imagine if your players have been wandering the desert for days, they're suffering from exhaustion due to the thirst, and then they find an oasis. Tell you what, your players are only going to make that mistake once. So the next one is the Complete Spacefarer's Handbook from the Spelljammer setting. I mentioned in one of my previous videos that during 2nd edition, TSR released a lot of the supplements called handbooks, and the reason why they were so successful is that these handbooks are targeted towards the players, whereas everything else, including everything that we've just gone through so far in this video, were designed for a DM to use. And because players vastly outnumber DMs, these handbook supplements sold significantly better than anything else. So every class during 2E received its own handbook: the fighters, the wizards, the priests, so on. And also races, they expanded them to dwarves, elves, halflings, gnomes. And then some of the settings received a handbook. So Spelljammer, Al-Qadim, Dark Sun, Planescape received a handbook supplement. So most of these handbook supplements had a cover that's made out of essentially plastic, and they are super durable. So looking through the table of contents, it seems like several of the Spelljammer races were introduced in this book. We've got the Gif, the Huddlesy, the Lizardmen. I don't recognize the other races. I've only read through about half the Spelljammer campaign setting box set, so there are just so many books and I'm a bit behind. Chapter 3 Spacefarer kits. So kits during 2nd edition were kind of like a cross between of a 5e subclass and a background, where it changes your base class, gives you additional advantages and disadvantages. And then there's a chapter on role-playing in this setting, proficiencies, They're kind of like skills, but they're also an optional rule in 2E. And then we have logistics, how to run your Spelljammer ship, the crew, the supplies, and that kind of stuff. Spacefaring organizations. And then campaign design. Seems like DMs will also get a lot of use out of this book. And the last book is Divine Power for 4E. Now I have played 4E, and it was fun to an extent, but there's also a lot that I don't like about it. However, there's 3 things that I like about 4E. So the first thing was that the visual design UI was really excellent. The way that they format the pages, how everything is color-coded, format is fantastic. And this consistency is carried across the entire 4E line of products. I really dig the design aspect of these books. I think I actually like it better than 5E. And especially if you compare it to 3E, where you see this is just walls and walls of text. And because 3E is so crunchy, I mean, look at this, all of these are just numbers. But the way it's written, it all just kind of blends into each other. It's so difficult to extract information. Different classes or monsters or whatever will just blend into each other. The fact that they've just used a slightly larger font and underlined and say, yep, this is a new idea. Whereas in 4E, when you switch over to a new class or a new monster, it should be its own page. Like this, like this. See? This is so easy to read. You've got the artwork, you've got the color-coded powers versus this. What am I even reading? And look at this. What is this piece of artwork even for? Tomb Warden. Tomb Warden only has about 10% of the page, and yet the artwork for it is on this page, where the majority of the writing is done for the previous idea, which is Master Vampire. So that's the first thing that I like about 4E, the visual consistency. Second thing I like about 4E is that they have psionic classes. I absolutely love psionic classes. It received its own book called Psionic Power. I already own that. And the third thing was that they brought back Dark Sun for 4E. If anybody is running 4E and they're either running Dark Sun or they will allow me to play a psionic class, especially if I can play a psionicist in Dark Sun, I will be there. So I'm not the biggest 4E fan, but I am collecting the books, although it's probably lower on the priority. And the reason why I bought this was because this shop was having a great sale on, and I needed to spend another $20 to get free shipping, because the shipping itself was going to be like $20. So I was like, well, you know, what can I find? And most of their 4E books are not very expensive, so this ended up costing like $21 or $22. I was able to meet my minimum quota, so that's why I got this book. The next one is a smaller package. So this is a novel called Blood Hostages. It's part of the Blood Wars trilogy for Planescape. So the blurb reads, Araya knew nothing about the plains and the evil denizens that dwelt there, until his uncle was abducted by a pair of gargoyles in the employ of an 8-armed god. Hot on the trail of these otherworldly worshippers, Arayas and his cousin Nina enter bizarre and twisted worlds beyond imagining. Arayas find that his uncle's abduction is part of a much larger plot to turn the tide of the fiendish blood war and loose an unspeakable evil throughout the plains. Though the plains hold unspeakable evil, they also hold unimaginable good, the two in a delicate balance. The only question is, which way will Arayas and Nina tip the scales? Now, I will admit, novels is generally not my thing. I'm a very slow reader, and I tend to struggle with a lot of text with no pictures, so it's not really my preferred medium. However, since Planescape is my favorite setting, I thought maybe I should start collecting these books, because they're getting outrageously expensive now, just like all the other Planescape books. So this is the first book of the trilogy, and it's the cheapest one. So there were only 5 Planescape novels released. There was the Blood Wars trilogy, Pages of Pain, which is written from the Lady of Pain's perspective, and Planescape Torment, the novel. So I think another one of the books is called Planar Powers, and I can't remember what the third book is called. So I originally was not going to bother with the novels, but the reason I changed my mind was because now that I'm running Planescape, I want to get inspirations from other sources to see how other people portray the plane so that I can actually incorporate that into my game. I don't know when I'm going to get the time or the patience to read through these books though. This is the Psionic Artifacts of Athas, another Dark Sun supplement, but this is specifically for the revised Dark Sun campaign setting released in 1995. So the back of this book says it's a 128-page accessory featuring dozens of artifacts from the Prism Panted series of novel detailed here for the first time. So the Prism Panted series were 5 novels that was released for the Dark Sun setting, which caused major changes in that setting, and this is part of the reason why they had to revise the setting, because the novel kind of killed off half of the villains. So this book introduces artifacts that were featured in those novels, but also some new items as well. So the question that I've got in my mind is, the word artifact meant something quite specific during 2nd edition. Artifacts and relics were only used for the very top end magical items. These are the ones that potentially have the power to destroy the world, has a lot of power, but also has a lot of drawbacks as well. So I believe that I will have a book that's coming up next that talks about it more. The artifacts that I know during 2E are the Hands and Eyes of Vecna and the Rod of 7 Parts. The word artifact was specifically used to denote that level of power. I'm wondering if these artifacts that's being introduced in this book are of that level of power. So it starts from page 5. Let's go have a look. So we've got the Belt of Kings, and reading its powers, a dwarf donning the Belt of Kings has an effective charisma of 18 to all dwarves, so that's pretty powerful. Non-dwarves wearing the belt gain an additional +4 to all reactions with dwarves. Charisma works a little bit differently in 2E, and the reaction roll is a function of charisma that you will roll when you meet NPCs to see what their initial disposition is towards you. However, the way that this sentence is written, the fact that they get a straight +4 to all reaction rolls, functionally could be better than effective charisma of 18, because if you currently have 16 charisma, or God forbid, if your charisma is already 18, meaning you already get a +2 or a +4 to your reaction rolls anyway, the +4 would actually be added to what you currently already have. So reading how it's been written, this could potentially benefit non-dwarves better. All non-magical missiles fired at the wearer of the Belt of Kings unerringly strike the artifact's buckle, inflicting no damage, so essentially immune to non-magical missiles. The belt also allows the wearer to move normally as if attacked by web, hold, or slow as a ring of free action. Wearing the artifact greatly enhances the battle savvy of the character. Warriors wearing the belt as if they were 4 levels higher. This is an amazing advantage. So warriors in 2E is the umbrella term for fighters, paladins, rangers, but in Dark Sun, paladins are not a playable class, but they have the gladiator instead. Warriors' THAC0 grows at +1 per level, so being 4 levels higher means that they have essentially a +4 to attack. And non-warrior classes fight as if they were warriors of an equal level. This is also a great benefit because the other classes' THAC0 do not grow as quickly as the warriors. So for example, I think the wizard's THAC0 grows at a quarter the rate of the warriors. If the wizard was to don this belt, their ability to fight using a weapon would skyrocket. The belt wearer is treated as if proficient with any weapon he or she chooses to fight with. Again, a great benefit, especially for non-warriors, especially someone like wizards, because their weapon selection is extremely limited. So with this belt, wizards would effectively be able to use great swords and fight as a warrior of the same level, getting the same THAC0 and also attacks per round, because warriors also get additional attacks per round as they increase in level. And artifacts in 2E have a curse on them, so should the possessor of the Belt of Kings ever unjustly take the life of a dwarf, the artifact will constrict to a diameter of 4 inches, effectively crushing the wearer to death. And 2E artifacts also gives a suggested means of destruction. The intention for artifacts in 2E, due to them being such powerful magical items and have curses on them, it should not be in the player's possession for long, and generally they should be destroyed after you've used it for what you needed it for, so it doesn't fall into the wrong hands, that kind of stuff. Submerge the belt in the blood of 100 murdered dwarves. So reading this entry does make it seem like these are true artifacts. So the book also gives you multiple artifact random powers chart. There are many of these, so it seems like you could use these to design your own artifacts. And then it also gives you many new magical items as well, even if they're not at the power level of an artifact. Speaking of artifacts, I hate price tag stickers. I always try to rip them off if I can. Ta-da! So this is the Book of Artifacts by David Zabcook for AD&D 2E. I remember seeing this book in the shops when I got into the hobby. I flipped through a few times, but when I was younger, my attention was definitely on the campaign settings. So this was released in 1993. Now, David Zabcook wrote the second edition Player's Handbook. He also went on to write the Planescape campaign setting in 1994. This predates Planescape because the campaign settings would be listed on the inner cover, and they still had Greyhawk at this point. Planescape was always the second one from the bottom. So I already talked about artifacts a little bit on my previous book, but this is the book that I learned what artifacts were. So looking at the table of contents, some of the really famous ones, we've got the Machine of Lum the Mad, which was featured in Baldur's Gate 2 Throne of Baal, Ring of Gax, which was also in Baldur's Gate 2, however in that game it was just a super powerful magic item and didn't actually have any downsides. Rod of Seven Parts, which had its own deluxe adventure box set in 2E, and I believe this is also the premise of the new Vecna adventure in 5E. And then we have the Hand and Eye of Vecna, Codex of the Infinite Planes also, I didn't realize it was an artifact, Baba Yaga's Hut. So these are just some of the artifacts that I recognize. Let's have a look at Rod of Seven Parts, page 91. So each piece of the rod has its own minor power. From Cure Light Wounds, which is the level 1 spell, Haste Slow, Gust of Wind, to heal. And then when you start connecting them together, you get additional powers. With 2 parts, you can fly at will. 3 parts add 20% to magic resistance. Control Wind, Shape Change, Wind Walk. And then with the final piece assembled, a character can cast Restoration once a day. I mean, this is okay and not really mind-blowing powerful. And then fully assembled rod radiates an aura of fearsome icy law affecting anyone within 20-foot radius. All enemies who fail to successfully save versus spell must flee in panic. Big deal. I am really underwhelmed. I am really underwhelmed. I suppose this is really quantity over quality. If you add up all of the minor powers, I guess it's you've got a Swiss Army knife of powers, but none of them really does anything major. Let's have a look at the curse. The rod immediately changes any character possessing one or more of its segment to an absolute follower of law, beyond the most rigid standards of lawful goodness. Character will feel compelled to intervene in all things and maintain the primacy of law over chaos, heedless of the effect for good or ill. Anyone, even close friends or other party members, not adhering to the owner's strict view are perceived as enemies. So essentially the rod turns you into lawful stupid. Upon assembling 3 pieces, owner will refuse to part with the rod at any time under any circumstances. Assembling the rod can be a very difficult task, requiring extensive wards and glyphs to be placed upon each segment. Bringing 2 segments within 1 foot of each other without first taking these precautions causes the newest largest piece of the rod to teleport 1d 100 miles to a random direction. Honestly, seems more work than it's worth. Having been violently shattered, the rod's new connections are very fragile, even with the best wards and glyphs. Anytime a major power is invoked, there's a 5% cumulative chance that the rod will break apart and each individual piece will teleport to a random direction as described above, but twice as far. So this is how I remember artifacts being. Mediocre powers and huge drawbacks. Back in the day, I've read through several of the entries in this book and I used to think, why bother? Like, it's a total pain in the ass. All of these artifacts carry with them so many restrictions, just so that you can get an extra few spells per day. Not worth it, I say. So I have a last minute surprise. So this package came in the mail after I had already taken the thumbnail picture, because when I ordered this, I got the notification that it was sent. However, the delivery estimate was going to be in July, so I wasn't expecting it until next week. However, this came overnight. So because this slipped in at the last minute, I'm going to include it as part of this video. And the last product that I'll be showing you today is Spelljammer, the Astromundi cluster. This is in excellent condition. So this box should contain 3 books, 2 maps, and 24 cards. So the back of the books essentially says that far off the travel paths of the world space, a lone crystal sphere bobs in the phlogiston. This is the Astromundi cluster. Unique amongst the spheres, cluster space holds no planets, only thousands of asteroids that wander in a seamless, endless realm. So crystal spheres in Spelljammer are like solar systems. And on that solar system will be a planet that hosts a prime material world. For example, Faerun on the planet Toril is in a solar system, so Toril actually orbits around the sun in that crystal sphere. And then Kryn of Dragonlance and Oath of Greyhawk are also situated in its own crystal spheres. So the Astromundi cluster describes a crystal sphere that has no solar system inside, which is fairly unusual, but instead is filled with asteroids. And this is what this box set is all about. So this book, The Astrogator's Guide, or maybe Astrogata, I don't know how to pronounce that word. So it goes through the factions that's in the cluster, playable races, so this will be an expansion to character options, and also some additional ships and equipment. It's interesting that the dwarves and elves are being reintroduced back into Spelljammer even though they are a core race. I don't recall in the core Spelljammer box set whether dwarves and elves were part of the standard character options at the start or not. I am not the most familiar with Spelljammer lore. So the next book, Adventures in the Shattered Sphere, it seems to talk about the power struggles of the different races and the different creatures that are living within the sphere. Adventure ideas, and then towards the end, mystery of the arcane. Arcane are creatures introduced in Spelljammer. Later on they made their way into Planescape as well. So most people don't know that the Illithids, also known as Mind Flayers, and Beholders are also part of Spelljammer, and their role in this setting is also quite different to how they're normally depicted. And Thri-kreen from Dark Sun also originated in Spelljammer. There are actually some pretty good art in this book. And then we have the arcane. And it's also interesting because the Tanari, also known as the demons, are also being tied into the Astromundi cluster. You can see that that's the Babal demon. And then the last book is the Celestial Almanac. So a portion of this book talks about the trade route and the economy. And the almanac forms majority of this book as it talks about the celestial bodies, mostly asteroids from the looks of things, that you can land on and adventure on. And then at the end of the book, you have the Tanari demons being introduced into Spelljammer. As this is before the release of Planescape, this does not contain Tony DiTerlizzi's art. And a piece of trivia for you, Spelljammer was discontinued in 1994. Planescape launched in 1994. Some fans speculate that Planescape replaced Spelljammer when it came to the setting which connected all the other settings. So we have the planetary display map. This looks like what Spelljammer uses in place of hex crawl maps for exploration. And then we have the Antlion Crystal Citadel. And then we have 24 pieces of artwork printed on cardstock. Oh, and they're double-sided as well. So they vary from ship designs to constellations, more ships and maps of colonies, solar system maps, artwork of NPCs, of different creatures, I like how the Illithids are depicted more as humanoids rather than monsters. So I think that's all we're going to show today. There's quite a lot. This is probably going to be a very long video. Thanks for staying to the end. Why don't you give me a thumb up if you liked what you saw, or subscribe if you really liked what you saw, and sound off in the comments and tell me what you liked. I'm going to try to release unboxing videos on a monthly basis or whenever I have enough to show. So until next time, hope we get to hang out again in my next video.